What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the latest episode of the Bleav in Oregon podcast. I'm Zachary Neal. My co-host over there is Jonathan Stewart. Jay Stu, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm fantastic. Uh, how's the
Fantastic.
how's the weather over there?
The weather's good for the next couple of days. It's gonna get in the hundreds this weekend, and we are really, really not looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, you just gotta hydrate.
Gotta hydrate. Well,
Hydrate.
we had plans to have friends over for a barbecue on Saturday, like a late 4th of July barbecue. It's supposed to be
hmm
like 103 or 104. So we're like, maybe we don't do that. Maybe everyone just goes and hangs out inside.
Well, listen, just find a tent. Go to Lowe's or something. I don't
Yeah,
know. Big Five is Big
yeah.
Five. No, Dick's Sporting Goods.
We got both
Um,
here.
yeah, and just get you a couple tents. Anchor down.
Yeah,
Start hydrating on Thursday.
yeah,
And when I'm talking about hydrate, I'm talking at least a gallon of water a day.
yeah. Yep.
Um, Take one of those, electrolytes, whatever your electrolyte
Hmm.
pack that you like of your choice. Make sure you do that. One of the things I learned this past weekend, my wife was telling me it's better to eat your hydration, eat your water. So
Oh, so
watermelon,
watermelon and fruit. Interesting.
fruits, plums,
Huh.
peaches. So
Okay.
eat your hydration starting Thursday.
See, all of that, braving the weather, braving the heat sounds good to me. Like, I'd be down to just, hang out, in a little kiddie pool and have a tent up and get some shade. My, 7 months pregnant wife does not really feel the exact same, so it's like, "Alright, if you don't wanna be outside, I can't blame you."
I understand. You got to do what you got to do. You got to, lead your family,
Yeah.
and protect the house and protect yourself.
Yes, yes. We must protect this house. We've got a great show for you today. Like we said last week, we're gonna do our Big Ten show and tell. So basically, Jay Stu and I each divided up the teams in the Big Ten, and we're gonna do a deep dive, bringing out all of the information that you fans need to know about these teams as we get into the preseason. Excuse me. Before we get into that, though, I have a much more pressing topic for you. How the hell was Christian McCaffrey's wedding this past weekend?
Man, Christian's wedding was amazing. First of all, Christian and Olivia McCaffrey now.
Yeah.
There are a couple that I just think to myself, they are maximizing their life in every way possible. They've gone about their lives, you know, individually, the way anyone would, want to go about it, which is, you know, grit, determination, their work ethic, and everything that they do. Their work ethic professionally is just going to transfer so well into their marriage. And I think they're just going to be really good role models for this generation and generations to come, as far as, what it looks like to be a good person, um, and, to just live your life to the fullest in ways that, um, bring people together, in harmony. And I mean, the wedding itself was beautiful. It was emotional. Just their friendship and and the people that were there, I think was more impressive. Is eclectic group of people, but everyone there, um, it you connected in ways that you don't normally connect with a group of strangers,
Mhm.
like that. But everyone there seemed to be of like-minded individuals, and that says a lot about, you know, Christian and Olivia and the support system that they have as they go forward. Because as you get married, you know, your friendship groups switch up because a lot of people might not be in the same bubble. They might not be in the same path. They might be, single, living the single life, or they might have different goals. And, but it was an honor to be there,
Mhm.
to share their love and their happiness together. And, I think their families, are perfect for each other. The McCaffrey, brothers, just seeing how they interact with each other is very special as well. Um, no, it's no question that Christian is the young man that he is because of the love of his family.
I love that you just completely buried the lead last week when we were on the podcast. You're like, "Yeah, I'm going out of town this weekend. I got a wedding to go to." Then I see on social media, I was like, "Oh, you're at fucking Christian McCaffrey's wedding." Okay,
Yeah,
that was a little bit different than I would be talking about that nonstop if that's the wedding I was going to.
but you want to know
Um,
what I did though while I
yes,
was there?
please, please.
I went and golfed
I was
because
assuming you would say that.
golf is life. I played at Winnipeg,
Nice.
very hard course, and
Yeah.
I shot an 85. An
Wow, look at
85, dog.
you. We
Yeah,
are in
got
mid-season
a
form.
yeah, I got a little help by some little bounces back into the
Hey,
to
that's
the
fine.
back into play.
Doesn't matter how you get from point A to point B as long as you get there.
I actually hit a house and it bounced back into play. So
Exactly.
uh,
Doesn't matter how you get there, just as long as you get there.
just as long as there's no video out there for me to have to, you know, follow up on
So,
questions.
I have several questions about the wedding. How was the food? How was the dancing? Just to start.
Huh, the food was amazing. Everything was, 5 star,
Mhm,
6 star, whatever you want to call it. Uh, it was great, man. I mean, had Aperol spritz. We had a lot of those. But more than the food, the fellowship. I was able
mhm.
to connect with a lot of old teammates of mine, guys that are actually in Charlotte that we don't get to see each other often because we got families and we're busy. And when we see each other, it's like quick in passing or, something that we're doing for, for the team or something like that. And so it's just always good to be out and about and somewhere else outside of Charlotte to really spend time with, you know, guys that have spent countless hours and days and years with. And those, people are, Greg Olson, Luke Kuechly, JJ Jansen, just a lot of good people just to catch up with. So yeah, food
Is
was good.
there Are you a person who gets starstruck still? You're kind of a star of your own. Was there anyone at the wedding where you're like, "Wow, that's so and so. I need to go meet them."
No, but I will say on the dance floor, um, Paul Swan is
Mhm.
uh is a good friend of mine. He is in the NASCAR industry in the pit crew, and he is a dog. And when I mean dog, just a guy he's just a guy's guy, and he's a little bit intimidating if you don't know him. You can look him up after we're done. But a good friend of mine, and it was just good to see him. And we tore up the dance floor together. Just know that I was wearing clothes at one point, and it got really sweaty, and my shirt got really sweaty. So just imagine what happened after that.
I was just
Um,
about to ask. I was like, "Are you a wedding dancer? You strike me as a big time wedding dancer. You're not
I'm
gonna
a
be off
big
that dance
time
floor."
wedding dancer. So
Okay.
if you had to ask me that question, you asked me if I was like starstruck by
Uh-huh.
anyone, I would actually say it would have been a guy named Frank. And
Uh-huh.
Frank is my alter ego. And that's who I saw on the dance floor. There was a moment in time where I saw a reflection in a window,
Uh-huh.
those weird glaring like nighttime reflections. And it was Frank. I was like,
So
wow, Frank.
Frank had his shirt off on the dance floor.
I'm not gonna say he didn't. Are you saw Frank with his shirt off? I didn't
I'm
see Frank
just
with his
from
shirt
what
off.
you're saying, it sounds
I
like
didn't.
Frank might have ended up with his shirt off.
I just said Frank was sweaty and he had a good time. It was hot. He was dancing. Um, his legs were very sore and like rattling at the end of the night. My wife actually made me a hot tub when we got back to the
There you go.
hotel room
Yeah,
and
Frank had to rest up.
a cold shower. So I basically had a spa setting at at the hotel because she
There
knew
you
I
go.
needed to recover for the next day because we were about to, board our airplane.
Uh-huh.
The air the flight back was actually just atrocious.
Oh, no.
Um,
You didn't have your
yeah,
kids with you, did you?
no, 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 no. It
Okay,
was an adult trip, which was
that's
really
fun.
fun. But I
Man,
couldn't
miss
have done
those.
it. I couldn't have done it with my 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 teammates and my ex teammates and their spouses. We traveled together basically back to Charlotte, So it was me, my wife, Greg, his wife, and Luke, and JJ Jansen and his wife.
Mhm.
And we all traveled back to Charlotte, but our plane was delayed because of weather, switching airplanes. I mean, I don't know what Boeing is doing, but they're messing up these planes. Um, they need to get with
I
it because
I
there's
hear
a
that's
lot
in
of,
the news right now.
yeah, they need to get with it. I mean, I'm glad to not be flying in a plane that could potentially have problems, but
Yeah,
I would like to not have a 5 hour, 4 hour delay.
that's very true.
Um, yeah, get me back to my kids.
Yeah.
But it was a good time, man.
That's good. I'm glad. That sounds like a lot of fun. I was happy to see the photos of that, and happy to. I think the thing I'm stoked about the most is your golf game. The 85, man. That's what I want to talk about.
That's what
Who
I'm
cares
more
about the
excited
wedding?
about too. Golf is life, and
Golf is
everybody
life.
knows that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into our show and tell. Like we
Mhm.
said earlier, we both have three teams to talk about today, so we will try and keep it relatively concise because there's six teams to talk about. We don't want to have a 2 hour show, but Stu, we'll have you go. We'll have you go first. Who did you bring to show and tell today?
Um, you know, I had Ohio State.
Okay, let's start off
Um,
with the big one.
yeah, Ohio State, they lost, last year in the Cotton Bowl
Hmm.
to Missouri Tigers. You know, they are all they're a team that's almost always been there, right?
Hmm.
Like just so close every year.
Yep,
Um,
they enter
and
every year competing for a championship. That's
yeah,
their bar.
that's their bar. Um, and I think, Ryan Day has, you know, a little bit of you know, a patience tag on him, if I could say. You know,
Which is so
he's
strange.
it's so strange because they're 56-8. He's
Yeah.
56-8. In his coaching tenure, as the head coach for Ohio State. The last time they won a national championship, though, was in 2014.
Hmm.
Five playoff appearances since the beginning of the playoffs in 2014. That first year of the playoffs, they won the first national championship, right?
We won't
Um,
mention against who.
yeah, we don't care. Uh, but it's gonna be different this year.
Yes, it will.
Um, but
Hold
I
on. Can
think
I can I pause you real quick? This
yeah,
just came up right before we started recording. Did you see the EA Sports College Football 25 like deep dive that they did?
no,
They put out a new video and they are apparently trolling Oregon in this because they like went through, they're like, all right, this is what the college football playoff will look like. This is like a make believe bracket, like an example of a bracket. It had Oregon winning the national championship over Ohio State. Awesome. But they made the score 42-20, which is the score that Ohio State beat Oregon
beat
by.
Oregon.
And
Mm.
so it's kind of like, what are you saying here? Are you like just trolling Oregon by saying you're gonna, I don't know. I just had to bring that up and see if you saw that.
Well, it doesn't really matter what they troll.
That's
Like
true.
I'm at the point now. Look, Oregon fans, college fans, NFL fans, NBA fans, Olympic fans. It doesn't really matter until it matters.
Yeah.
So whatever trolling is happening, don't respond, or at
Yes,
least
it's
try
very
not
true.
to.
Yeah.
Um, play the game. It's back. Don't complain. I
Can't
can't
wait.
wait to play
Oh,
NCAA. It's been a while.
yeah.
It's actually been a while since I touched a video game,
You have
but
to break it out.
because of NCAA, I have to break it out. Hopefully,
Yep.
I'm in the game. I'm not really sure.
We'll
If
see.
I hopefully I'm not entirely too slow or and whatnot because I just feel like D'Anthony Thomas is just gonna create that spread of speed.
Mhm.
It's like, well, if D'Anthony's this fast, that means Jonathan has to be this fast.
Alright, back to Ohio State. Tell
Yeah.
me about this current team. Who have they lost? Who have they added? What are we looking for this year?
So departures, I would say the biggest one, they don't really have a lot, of departures that will make or break them, in my opinion. But Julian Fleming, the receiver,
Mhm.
I think he probably felt last year, um, even though he had, the number one pick, um, you know, taking all the reps and all the
Mhm.
the open looks. He had 0 touchdowns last year, 200 plus yards. The year before that, he had a better year, 500 plus yards, 6 touchdowns. So I'm pretty sure he's thinking to himself, look, if you guys aren't valuing me, I'm going to dip out. So he dipped out. But I just feel like them as a whole, they're uh, they don't really have a lot of holes.
No,
Besides,
they lost Marvin Harrison
yeah, they
Jr.,
lost
which is
Marvin
obviously
Harrison
the best receiver in the class,
in the
so that's
country.
tough to replace, yeah, but
Yeah, but the QB battle might be the only, um, hiccup that they have to like overcome. A little bit of offensive line, but
yeah,
I mean,
I wanna talk to you about that QB battle too, because you said this a few times on the podcast, like, past episodes, like, saying Ohio State doesn't know who their QB is. I wanna push back a little bit. I think they do. I think it's gonna be Will Howard, and it's pretty
yeah,
set. It's kinda like, Oregon has Dante Moore, and is he competing with Dylan Gabriel? It's like, yeah, maybe, but I don't think so. Dylan Gabriel's a starter. I think Will Howard's gonna be the starter, and I think they feel pretty confident about that going into the season.
I mean, yeah, but there's still a battle, right? Because
Yeah.
he's the most. I would say Will
It's not
Howard
given
has
to
the,
him, yeah.
yeah, he's the most. What's the word? He has the most experience.
Mhm.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
his
don't think
spot to
he's
lose.
yeah, he's not we don't he doesn't have the greatest arm strength. He's a
Mhm.
great athlete, he's big. Um, he has the stature, but and maybe it's because he didn't really have any help last year with the
Yeah.
team that he was playing with at Kansas.
Mhm.
Uh so um or Kansas State. And but I just still feel like that's their weak point, which makes it
Yeah.
if it's not really a weak point, then that means they're really that good. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's fair to say because, I mean, you look at this roster, and I know you're gonna continue to go through it, but they are so stacked at every
Hmm.
position that quarterback, I mean, we're used to Ohio State having an A plus Heisman contending quarterback almost every year.
Yeah,
And, this year they don't have quite that level. I mean, we did a quarterback ranking in the Big Ten a few weeks ago on Duckswire, and I think Will Howard was like fourth or fifth. So like he's not the best quarterback in the conference. He's really good. I'm sure he'll be
yeah,
just fine. And when you've got the talent around him that he does, I'm sure he'll be incredible with that. But it
yeah,
is going to be interesting to see what he can do and how far he can take them by himself.
exactly. Um, but that's really as far as departures go. I think my biggest additions. I mean, the additions is more so um, a wowing factor that makes them a complete team.
Mhm.
Um, you have Quinshawn Junkins. I think that's his name, Junkins or
Judkins, yeah.
Judkins.
Mhm.
Um, you know, Ole Miss running back, good acceleration on especially on contact, meaning when a running back sees contact and delivers punishment, he's accelerating through contact, meaning he's speeding up. That is an incredible trait for a runner because a lot of guys slow down on contact and, you know, they usually don't get, you know, like as many, breakaways, right?
Mhm.
So he's creating his own yards after contact. He has great jump cut, great patience, vision, all of the above. Last year he averaged 4.3 yards per carry. The previous year before, it was a little bit higher. Um, and then they have Travion Henderson.
Mhm.
So the duo, as far as the running backs, I think that's going to be hard to stop. And I think if anything, Will Howard and his ability and his stature at quarterback, that's a great combination. And they're gonna have to really rely on that running game out the gate as he gets comfortable. And so that's a great addition. You can never have a little bit too much. You can never have enough depth at running back, in my opinion. Um,
What about
and then
defensively?
yeah, defensively, you have Alabama safety Caleb Downs, freshman. He's a
I th
dog.
I think
Oh
he
my
is
gosh,
the biggest addition they had this offseason.
he might be he might be the best player at the end of the day in the nation when it
I
comes to defense.
I mean, he was a true freshman last year at Alabama, and
Yeah.
they could
Ha
not keep him off the field. He was an
yeah.
incredible player, and then when he went into the transfer portal this offseason, it was like, "Oh my gosh, this
Oh,
guy
wow.
is available," and they won the Caleb Downs sweepstakes. Like you said, I think he is maybe the best defensive player in the nation. I can't wait to see how high he gets drafted because safeties
Yeah.
don't typically go, top 5, but, I
Yeah.
mean, he's he's gonna be up
He's a
there because he
player.
is so
He's
good.
always around the ball. He had
Mhm.
107 tackles last year, 70 solo, 2
As a true
interceptions
freshman
as a true freshman.
at
And so
Alabama.
and then I saw this interview of Ryan Day talking about, oh yeah, he's also, asking for reps at running back.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
incredible.
okay, I played on teams where, you have, defensive guy or offensive guy that switch at some point throughout their career. Some that come to mind is Kenyon Barner. He got recruited as a DB.
Mhm.
You look at Eddie Pleasant. When I was
Right.
there playing, he was a safety linebacker type. And he played running back. You know what I'm saying? So like there's a lot of guys that can obviously go both ways.
Kinda like
But
a
when you
Charles Nelson too.
yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, it's good that they're already thinking about this because
Mhm,
if you think about it, this is going to be a longer season. And so you need to have a contingency plan when it comes to operation. Guys are going to
mhm,
get banged up. You might not have your two main dogs at the end of the season, knock on wood, right?
mhm.
So having a contingency plan at that running back position and having someone like Caleb Downs capable of taking reps at running back is
Mhm.
even more appealing
Yeah,
because if you ask me, that means he's going to be a crazy threat when it comes to special teams.
yeah.
Um, Punt return, kickoff return, my guy's going to have the ball in his hands
Mhm.
at some point this season, and not just on interceptions and fumble recovers.
So, overall season outlook, bowl projections, what's kinda your expectation for this team?
Man, you know them they haven't been a losing team. They just have been losing the wrong games over the
Yeah.
last several years.
They've
So
lost,
I
what,
think
2 straight, 3 straight to Michigan? Their
to
biggest rival?
Michigan, exactly. So obviously next year they're primed to be able to break that streak.
Mhm,
And I think this year losing needs to be their fuel to be better, right?
mhm,
That needs to be like their chip. They need to have a chip on their shoulder so that way they can actually go into the season and dominate the way they
mhm,
should be able to dominate because they're arguably the most talented team in the nation. I think they're, the I mean, I guess the problem might be the coaching is the only way that can really
yeah.
prevent them from being
And
good.
this is a coach who's 56-8, and that's what we're
Yeah,
saying, like, that might be their weak point. It's insane.
yeah,
I
exactly.
have I
But
have
I have
this, go ahead.
I have them as far as bowl projections, Orange Bowl, obviously, but
I mean, it'll be a
that's gonna
playoff game.
it's
Their
gonna be a
their
playoff game.
bar is making the playoff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I have these questions written down. I mean, the first one I already know the answer to because we've talked about it. Can they win the championship? Yes. They're the
Yes.
most talented team in the nation. It would not be at all a surprise if we leave this season and Ohio State wins the championship. They're that good. What I'm
Mhm.
more interested to talk about is what's the bar for a successful season? What is the worst they can be and fans still think, yeah, that was a good season. We'll take that. What do you think that is for Ohio State this year?
Losing in the Orange Bowl to Oregon.
Okay. Orange Bowl, would that be I forget which bowls is that the championship game or is that a
That
Final Four?
that's a Final Four.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
think they have to make it to a Final Four this year for it to be a success?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Because they're I mean, they're the most talented team in football right now. I
Yeah.
mean, you got Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon. Um, and I mean, the problem is that Ohio State has the potential to play Oregon 3 times this year,
Yeah, they do.
if you think about it.
Mhm.
Um, and so I mean they got tough sledding, especially if Oregon comes to play. But I think, one of the we didn't talk about this. I think one of the key elements to Ohio's success is Chip Kelly.
Yeah, I
Um,
completely
and
forgot, honestly.
And so I think everything about what they did this offseason, um, they're stacking their chips, and they're going for it. I mean, Ryan Day basically saying, "Hey, look, I don't want to call. I can't call plays." So you bring in Chip Kelly, who they actually basically grew up in the same town.
Mhm.
Read somewhere that they call these coaches the Manchester Mafia because they're all from Manchester, New Hampshire.
I like
Uh,
that.
you know, attended the same high school and everything.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's an age gap between Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, but the energy there alone, I think that provides a good system when it comes to leadership. Um, and just knowing Chip Kelly and how he operates, this man's finally doing what he loves to do, which is he quoted, "I just want to be happy, and I'm really happy coaching the position, which
Mhm.
is being an offensive coordinator,
Mhm.
not a head coach."
And
And
not
so,
recruiting.
yeah, and so I think this team is very scary for those reasons set alone. Um, you know, you can only mess it up.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's wrap up our Ohio State there. I
Mhm.
know just for the listener, yeah, we went long on Ohio State. We've got 5 more
Yeah,
of these to do. We'll try and keep it a little tighter, but Ohio State is like, the biggest team in the Big Ten. So obviously we
yeah.
went a little bit long in there. We needed to talk about them.
Mhm.
I am bringing to show and tell Penn State, another big team. We might go a little bit long on this one too. We'll go shorter with the other ones, but Penn State, I think, is a really interesting team this year because they lost a lot of players. They had 8 players selected in the NFL draft this year.
Mhm.
They're trying to replace, gosh, I'm going to try and pronounce this name correctly, Olumia Fashanu, the offensive tackle. He went 11th to the New York Jets in the first round. Chop Robinson went 21st to Miami, defensive end. They had a couple more offensive linemen and cornerbacks drafted. They lost a couple of wide receivers through the transfer portal, a couple of defensive backs, but so they lost a lot. They're trying to replace a lot, but they have a lot coming in as well. They got a really good cornerback from Georgia, AJ Harris. They got, like you said, with Ohio State, wide receiver Julian Fleming, who didn't have the best year this past year, but has shown before that he can produce. And then they also have the number one tight end in the nation from the 2024 class coming in, and former 5-star Luke Reynolds. So the talent is there for them to be really good, I think. The case with Penn State over the past few years is the talent has been there. The coaching, I think James Franklin, we think is a decent coach. He just needs to put it together. We just need to see them actually do it and put the chips in the right order and be able to find success in this conference.
Yeah. So what do you think about, the squad as far as offensively, like how are they going to get things rolling?
It starts and ends with QB Drew Aller, I think this is his junior year. I think he sat most of his freshman year, was a full-time starter last year. Can he take a step forward? He is really talented. I think he is a former 5-star recruit. I should have looked that up before this, but he's got the talent to be really good. He's a good decision maker. I think he had 25 or 29 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions last year.
Mm.
So he is a guy that if he takes the step forward that we think he can, Penn State can absolutely be in that conversation in the Big Ten and be, going up against Ohio State or Oregon or one of those top teams for a spot in the conference championship. It all starts and ends with Drew Aller to me. There's other really, really good players. I mean, back to defense, Abdul Carter, defensive end, will probably be a first round pick in 2025. He's considered one of the top edge rushers in this draft class. They've got a really, really good running back field. I mean, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, one of the best RB duos in the Big Ten. So they're set with like I was saying earlier, they're set with the players where they need to be. They just have to, for whatever reason, over the past couple of years, they have not put it together. That could be coaching. I know that one of the podcasts, the college football podcast I listen to, one of the hosts is a Penn State alumni, and he is openly frustrated at James Franklin all the time for whatever reason and their offensive play calling. And so I know if they don't succeed this year, there might be some questions about that. But
James might
uh,
be gone, huh?
I wouldn't say that he'd be like fired after this year, but I think those talks might ramp up if they, if they have a lackluster season.
Well, if I'm Penn State, I'm scared because now you have Oregon, USC, UW, UCLA added to the mix, and that just adds a little bit more, um, just a crowded room, right?
Yeah.
So,
It got
you know,
more competition.
the room for error is very, very minimal.
Looking at their schedule this year, they're I looked up their over/under win total, it's set at 9.5. They've got tough games against USC, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Washington. They're lucky that they don't play Oregon or Michigan this year, so that's, good scheduling-wise for them. As far as, like, college football playoff, I think that would be a great achievement for them.
Yeah.
It would not be a disaster for them if they missed out, but I think that the goal for James Franklin and his team should be to make the first 12-team college football playoff. I think that's your bar. Again, I don't think they're really calling for a new coach if they miss out on that. But that's just going into the season. That's what I think they are trying to do. If you win a game in the playoff, awesome. If you miss out, yeah, you're a little bit disappointed. But if you make that, I think you're feeling pretty good about the season.
Yeah, and to our listeners, man, there's no limit this year to how many teams from one conference gets into the playoffs.
Correct.
It's all strictly based on, top 12, and it could be, I mean, obviously it can't be that many people, but it can be more than
Well, so
2 or 3
the
teams.
there's the
Go ahead.
the Power 4 conference champions, the,
Yep.
1 Group of 5 champion, and then the rest are just rankings. So if you're
Yeah.
ranked inside the top 11, there's a pretty good chance that you're getting into the playoff. It'd be kind of crazy if you were in the top 11. I don't think that's even possible. I'd have to run through that in my head, but if you're in the top 11 at the end of the year, you're pretty good, and Penn State has
Mhm,
been hovering around that for the past few years, so I think they can do
mhm.
it, but we'll see mainly what Drew Aller can do. That's what I'm watching for going into the season because he could be a really, really solid quarterback. We just have to see him put it together.
Yep.
All right, you ready for
Alright.
your next show and tell?
Yep. My next show and tell is USC.
Ooh, I'm excited for this one.
All right. Good riddance. All right.
Yeah, what do we do with USC this year, J Stu?
All right. Now, listen, 2022, they were solid, but they had bad defense. Lost Tulane bowl game,
Mhm.
46-45.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me your team scores 45 points and you lose to a team?
I think they
Come
had
on.
a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback that year as well.
Yeah, I think his name was what's his name? Caleb
Yeah,
mm, Williams. Yes, Caleb
might have
Williams.
gone first in the draft this past year. Huh, how do you
Yeah.
lose with him?
How do you lose with that guy? You have terrible defense. And then last year, 2023, you're 8-5, and it's basically Caleb Williams last year. I'm trying to stay healthy, uh, and you know, not be the shoulder and weight of this team because I'm trying to get to the league. So they have an 8-5 showing, but their defense was even more terrible.
Yeah, it
You're
was even worse.
104th ranked defense last year.
Ugh.
USC. Come on now. Um, Head coach Lincoln Riley, 19-8 throughout his tenure there so far. Um, you know, Speaking of defense, right? The biggest add-on is DeAnton Lynn. UCLA's defensive coordinator switch and went across the street to USC, basically. And he took UCLA's defense from being ranked number 86 in 2022 to last season being number 10. That's
They're
pretty
solid last
impressive.
year, yeah.
That was pretty impressive, UCLA. Um, and so I think that addition has to do something for USC this year. If
Mhm.
not, then they need to figure out how to get these players readjusted. But DeAnton, 3-4 defense, which is basically an aggressive defense that basically wants to utilize your linebackers to attack the gaps. I think last year you saw USC just out of their gaps, not playing sound football, not tackling, not, covering and being aligned. It's just a lot of things that you just watch, from a caliber team as USC. you're trying to watch a little. I mean, you call it college all you want, and yeah, they're children out there at the end of the day sometimes, but we're getting to the point where there's a lot of money being poured into these colleges and coaching. Like, we need you to get these kids to at least align properly and fit
Yeah.
their gaps. Fit
Mhm.
your gaps, bro.
Yeah.
And so, great addition there. They got some help at linebacker and going to the scheme. Having an active linebacker. As far as Easton Arnold, not even
Mhm.
going to say his middle name part there, but linebacker. He's a senior, which means he has a veteran presence. 107 tackles last year, 2 sacks, 2 picks, and played for Oregon State.
Mhm.
And a guy like that wanting to obviously transfer and showcase his skills on a national level, going to the Big Ten, he's got something to prove. So that's a huge addition.
So, it feels like in the past, we've always known what USC's offense was gonna be. I'm talking just in the Lincoln Riley era. We knew
Mhm.
that USC's offense was gonna be really good. The question was the defense. After doing your research, I mean, just from my I have not done a deep dive on USC and their roster yet. Do you feel as confident about the offense anymore? They lost Caleb Williams. They lost a lot of their best offensive players. It's between Miller Moss and Jade Maeva, who came over from UNLV. Do you feel confident about their offense, or is it kind of like there's question marks about the offense and the defense this year?
Man, look, Lincoln Riley is going to have these guys playing, I think, pretty well.
Mhm.
I think last year seeing Miller Mark in the bowl game, the
Miller
Holiday
Moss,
Bowl, or yeah, Miller Moss, yeah.
really good.
Uh, 6 touchdowns,
Yeah.
MVP. I mean, he had a good showing in that game. So if he can, really, um, copy and paste that, that'd be great.
Mhm.
And I think they won't really skip too much of a beat. I think their running game, might need some help, and consistency there. I think
Lost
they've
Marshawn
lost.
Lloyd, who was
Yeah.
yeah, who went in the draft.
And so as long as they can have someone step up there, they did get Woody Marks,
Mhm.
running back from Mississippi State. He's
Mhm.
a senior. So, having guys like that come, with a chip on their shoulder, ready to have something to prove, you know, being a. This is it. So hopefully he comes in there and he got something to bring to the table. But as far as offense being an issue, that's not going to be the issue. It's strictly defense.
Mhm.
The defense has to come to play. They're going to have depth issues, and uh, I think Jamil Muhammad, defensive end, he's a senior. I think that's the leader on that squad over there.
It's kinda like with USC, you gotta believe what you've seen until you're led to believe otherwise. We've seen offense be so good under Lincoln Riley, I don't really have too much concern that they'll be good. We've seen
Yeah,
defense be so bad under Lincoln Riley that I believe they're gonna be bad until you prove me otherwise.
until
Tell
you
me
prove
that
me.
they're not gonna be bad, so that's
Yeah,
kinda what I'm feeling with them going forward. But the biggest question for me, and I'll ask you this, could USC make the playoff this year? Can they make the
I,
college football playoff?
they can do anything if they put their mind to it. Nah. No, I got them being, they're not going to win 8 games.
Wow, you think they'll okay, you think 8 games is the ceiling for them.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Hmm.
what's the bar for a successful season? I mean, is it, should they feel good if they win 6 games and make it to a bowl? Or I feel like even if they win 8 games, USC fans are gonna be upset because they have higher aspirations than that.
I think you just gotta. It's sad, but it's all on the defense. They've been so terrible the last 2 years that it's hard for me to say that, hey, they're going to go into the Big Ten and be able to stop anyone.
Mhm.
So I think just taking that alone, you got to be happy with 8 wins or
I am
7.
looking I'm looking forward to, breaking out this clip of the podcast, putting it on social media because USC fans are active on Twitter,
Ah,
and you
yeah.
might have some mad fans in your mentions coming up.
Hey, man, listen, I went to Oregon and All I care about is Oregon and being, semi-correct.
Semi-correct, all right. I like it. Okay, that's good. We're gonna move on to my second show and tell. We'll keep this one shorter, and just by the name of the team, you might be like, "Why are they previewing this? We don't really care." I'm actually pretty fascinated by this team.
Mm,
They won't be near the top at the end of the season, but I think they'll be fun to watch. Indiana. I wanna talk about the
ooh.
Indiana Hoosiers.
Oh, yeah, please, enlighten me, brother.
Yeah. So Indiana has been god awful over the past not years, not decades. I mean, several decades. They have not won a bowl game. Let me see it. They have not won a bowl game since I Bleav it was 1991. They have not
Mm,
won 9 games in a season since 1967. I mean, this team
mm,
has been a bottom dweller for the past several decades. But I think they might be turning a corner starting this year. That's because they hired Curt Cignetti, who was the head coach at James Madison over the past few years. Really good head coach. He spent time at Alabama as well. It feels like there's a ton of hope in the Indiana program right now because they're kind of hoping that this guy, they finally hired a very serious head coach, and they're kind of hoping that he can turn them around. So, it's just talking about additions. Curt Cignetti is by far the biggest addition. Well, there's hope that he can actually like get them to be a relevant team in the Big Ten. They also got Curtis Rourke, the quarterback from Ohio.
mhm.
He's supposed to be decent. He's got good stats from Ohio's, but that's a much worse school. It's not a Power Five school. He's not playing in the Big Ten, so we'll see what he can do. But I think the combination of the new coach, new quarterback, there is a little bit of positive buzz going into the season for the Hoosiers.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, uh, you're giving a lot of hope to Indiana right now, bud.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, all right, let me give just some of the season. I'm not going to go over to players to know or their biggest departures because they didn't have anyone drafted. They haven't had anyone drafted in the past few years. They're not losing a ton. Like all due respect to Indiana, we don't need to go through the roster and say, "Oh, you need to know this guy. You need to know this running back or this tackle." No, you don't. You just need to kind of watch from afar. Like, all right,
But after
what's
this year, they're gonna have some guys that are gonna have some departures that you're gonna need to know about, is what you're
It
saying?
could be. It could be. So their win total is set at 5.5 this year. They should be able to beat their non-conference opponents. That's FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte. You should win those games. It's going to be tougher once you get into the conference because then you got to play teams like Nebraska and Washington and Michigan and Ohio State. All of those are going to be losses. But can you beat UCLA or Maryland or Purdue or Northwestern? Win 3 of those games and maybe become bowl eligible? I don't
Mhm.
know. Personally, I don't think they will, but I think the ceiling this year is to win 5 games, maybe 6 games and make it to a bowl. It's kind of tough to project that to project a floor for them because, a floor is doing what they've done for the past several years and just be bad again, but I think reasonable expectations are for Indiana fans to just be given some sort of optimism, some sort of reason to buy into the program and to Bleav that Curt Cignetti is the right coach going forward, and then he can turn them around to not even be, a Big Ten contender, but to be one of those middle teams, to be Maryland,
Yeah.
to be Northwestern, I think would be a win for Indiana in the next couple of years. So it feels like, college football is transitioning to this world of like haves versus have nots. It's like,
Mhm.
everything's breaking. It's like, oh, if you've won championships or won games, you're in this group and you're not. Indiana is currently part of the have nots, but I think that with a couple of good seasons, they might be able to reposition themselves a little bit.
Well, good luck, Indiana.
If we'll,
I'll s
yeah, we'll see how it goes for them.
Yeah, man. Um, she's 91. You know how old I was? I was 4 years old.
I wasn't even born yet.
Well, there you have it, guys. Good luck. This might
Yeah.
be a this might be the year, huh?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, I wanna temper expectations, like, I say all that to say that I don't think they're gonna be good this year. I don't think we'll be talking about Indiana in November, but they
They'll win more than 5 games.
maybe, and even if they don't win more than 5 games, if they can stay competitive against the likes of UCLA and Maryland and these other teams, if they could beat Purdue or Northwestern, I feel like, yeah, they feel pretty good about that, so just give the fans a reason to hope and give them a reason to Bleav in the future.
Yeah, just be that team where, you know, where a good team has to play you and they fear, um, being in that trap game.
Yeah, if you can get yourself in the mention of a trap game, I think you've
Yeah.
done a really good job.
Okay. There we go. Expectations are set.
Yes. All right, your third and final show and tell for the day.
Okay, Michigan,
Michigan
the defending champions.
defending.
Uh, they're not going to be able to defend a lot, in my opinion. Um, and
They
it's not
lost a
because
lot, huh?
they lost a lot. They lost 13 starters, man. 13, or like just 13 guys gone to the
Yeah.
draft.
Mhm.
Drafted. It means if you're drafted, that means you are good enough to help an NFL team win football games and get to a Super Bowl. It's the only way you're getting drafted is if they feel that you can help them reach the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
And Michigan had 13 of those guys.
That's impressive.
Um, Very impressive. And it's hard to replace that. And even if you do have a replacement at starter, we still got to talk about what, Zach? Depth.
Yep, always.
Always depth. And so that's the scary part because also too we have a longer season as we mentioned before. So your contingency plans are, a little bit haywire in my opinion.
Mhm.
And you have Sharon, is it Sharon?
Sharon Moore.
Sharon. Yeah, Sharon Moore, his first year as a head coach.
Yeah, I feel like you
Last
buried the lead here. They're not only replacing 13 starters, they're replacing their head coach.
Yeah, so he although he was an offensive line coach, offensive
Mhm,
coordinator, so I mean he can balance, and juggle a couple of things. You still have a task at hand to really navigate throughout the season when things don't go well, right?
mhm,
Because as you know, things don't ever go as planned. But Sharon Moore did a fabulous job last year taking over when Jim got suspended for 6 games.
mhm,
He's, his coaching tree is pretty well built. And so he has what it takes. Um, so I think, Michigan, you know, isn't out of range of
mhm.
having a good season. It's just going to be a little bit more of a battle, and it's going to be a little bit more of a test for this team, um, with a lot of loss. And
Yeah.
they did add some guys: Josh Preby, offensive lineman, C.J. Charleston, wide receiver from Youngstown,
Mhm.
who's a dog. I watched this film, and he's pretty nasty. And I just think the biggest addition here is Wink Martindale.
Yeah.
Wink
Big
Martindale
time.
was hanging out with John Harbaugh from 2012 to 2021.
Mhm.
Um,
Defensive
and
coordinator.
if you're sticking around that long as a defensive coordinator, that means you're doing some things right.
Mhm.
But I will say the only hesitation I have about Wink Martindale is, again, he has a 3-4 defense. Baltimore is known for their exotic fronts, guys moving around and causing just pure chaos.
Mhm.
Um, and we call coaches like that gurus. And if you think you're going to come to the college level and expect, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds to figure out exactly what it is that you want them to do
Mhm.
on site, it's not going to happen on site. So hopefully he has a philosophy that is a little bit more tempered, um, to who he's coaching, right? Because if not, you're going to end up being like USC and having your kids out of gaps and being exactly the opposite,
Well,
right?
and we kinda saw that with Dan Lanning too in his first year at
Mhm.
Oregon. I mean, Dan Lanning, this championship winning defensive coordinator with this incredible defensive scheme that was all the buzz, came to Oregon in his first year. Defense wasn't very good because his scheme is so dynamic and so
Mhm.
convoluted and complicated, the
Yeah,
intricacies that it took until his second year for the defense to be like, all right, they finally they'd been in the system, they learned it. That's why I'm super I know this is not an Oregon preview. I'm super excited to see the defense this year because now
I'm
you
being
get Jeff Bossa in his third year in that
yeah,
defensive scheme, and you get to see it a little
and
bit more.
and you have he has had time to, get guys in there that fits what
Mhm.
he wants to do schematically. And so I think Michigan, they're going to have to face the fact that some of the guys that's there might not fit what Wink Martindale wants to
Totally.
do. Um, so that's going to take a little bit of a learning curve. But obviously you have the biggest attraction, I think, in my opinion, is JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, let's talk about the quarterback position because that's easily their biggest hole slash question mark right now is who is going to be the starting quarterback, and it feels like that's going to be announced the week before the first game of the season because I think that is a very open competition between two, three, four players as big as you want to make that pool that aren't Heisman caliber, so to say. They're not contending to be the best in the league. You got Alex Orji, who has one career pass attempt. He was kind of used as a gadget quarterback last year, and then I think Jack Tuttle is probably the other guy, but there's several other guys in there as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, Alex, we don't know what his arm looks like,
I don't,
to your
he's
point.
thrown one pass.
Yeah. But just because we don't know what his arm looks like doesn't mean that he can be amazing.
Yeah,
So that's the biggest question mark for me. Um, and because I think the defense was good enough last year to where they can, roll the dice and be able to get by on some games as
mhm,
long as they have a quarterback that can manage on the other side of the ball.
yeah,
It's just so interesting to see a team, that was so dominant last year, um, and just have so many guys leave and expect them to repeat. And
yeah,
I don't really, I think if you're a Michigan fan, your expectations can't be 15-0.
mm-mm,
It can't. I don't even think it should be 10.
yeah,
Right? My expectation is nine games. Win
mhm,
9 games, and that's a good first year for your head coach. It's a good first year for whoever's playing quarterback,
mhm.
and hopefully you just maintain, the credibility for guys to, recruit and get guys, young guys, and continuing to fold in there and continue the legacy of Michigan.
Well, the fact of the matter is that 9 games this year may still be good enough to get you in that playoff. I mean,
And yeah.
there's no telling, like, how I think that 9 games is probably the floor for getting into one of those playoff spots, but we'll see how it plays out. One thing that if I'm a Michigan if I'm a Michigan fan that gives me some confidence going into this year is I think I feel really good about Sharon Moore, the head coach.
Hmm.
One of the biggest questions about when you have one of these young coaches is can they win the big game? I mean, we've talked about it a lot with Dan Lanning. You could talk about it with Ryan Day and his losses in some of the worst games or the biggest games over the past few years. Sharon Moore can win the big game. I mean, we when he was stepping in for a suspended Jim Harbaugh last year, he beat Penn State and he beat Ohio State and he won some huge games on their schedule. So
Yeah.
that's not his roster, that's not his scheme. He's obviously kind of just filling in for Jim Harbaugh, but he's got the stones to step up and actually, perform when the lights are as bright as they were. So
Yeah.
I feel
I think
confident that he can do that again going forward.
I also like the fact that he's an offensive line coach, background, because that
Yeah.
means he's not going to mess around and treat these Michigan kids like, or put diapers on them, basically, right?
Mhm.
They're going to be gritty, they're going to be tough, they're going to be physical up front, and oh yeah, Donovan Edwards
Yeah.
is primed
Really
for a
good.
big year next year.
Yeah.
Um, and they're going to have to depend on him in the running game
Mhm.
because of the fact that their quarterback situation, you know, we don't really know what that's going to look like. So the
Yeah.
running game's going to have to help that transition, anyways. But if Donovan Edwards is a, a glimpse or a blimp of what we saw last year,
Mhm.
man, that's going to be pretty special for him.
So what's the bar of success for this team? Is this a successful year even if they don't make the playoff, or do they have to make the playoff for this to be considered a success for them?
A successful year is for them to make the playoffs.
Okay.
Um, because you still have a great defense. Even with all of the guys that have left, you still got, Mason Graham. Will Johnson,
Mhm.
uh, Makari Page. So like the defense is still pretty solid. You got Colston Loveland at tight end. Um, he's basically the last of the Mohicans over there. Him and Donovan Edwards.
Yeah.
Um, so I think they still have the ability to control a little bit of their destiny to get to the playoffs, but to win a national championship, nah.
Yeah, I don't think that's in the cards this year, but I think they could definitely make a playoff. We'll see. They'll for sure be in that conversation come November, which I think is a solid place to be, especially for a team that lost as much as they did.
Yeah,
All right, let's go to our last preview. I have got the Iowa Hawkeyes for show and tell. This is an interesting conversation. Iowa, they get trolled a lot online on social media for how bad they are, but man, they're a really pretty good team. Their
yeah,
offense is just terrible.
terrible.
You know, they had some departures, some tough departures this last year. Number one is cornerback Cooper DeJean, who went in the second round to the Eagles. He was a very, very good cornerback. They also lost tight end Eric All to the Bengals in the fourth round. They lost a few other players in the transfer portal and a couple more to the draft as well. But the biggest addition they made is, again, not on the field. They got a new offensive coordinator, Tim Lester. He takes over for Brian Ferentz, who is the son of head coach Kirk Ferentz. Fun side note: my first grade teacher is the sister of Kirk Ferentz. That was always I was like a big Hawkeyes fan growing up just because of that. So, for
Yeah,
whatever that's worth, there's a tidbit about my life. Um, anyway, Brian Ferentz struggled as offensive coordinator for the past couple of years. In 2023, they averaged 15 points per game. That's atrocious. And I'm pretty sure one of those touchdowns was defensive per game. Like, you could always count on their defense to be so good, but their offense did absolutely nothing. So they bring in Tim Lester, who's a former head coach at Western Michigan. He was an offensive assistant with the Green Bay Packers last year. The hope is that he will turn this thing around, but you don't have a ton that you're working with. You know, Iowa's always had really great tight ends, but other than that, I don't know that they're like famous for having any other fantastic offensive players. So going into this year, it's kind of the opposite of USC. We know Iowa's defense is going to be very, very good. We know that it's going to be tough to score 28, 35 points on them. But you know what? You can score 17 points on them and win because their
yeah.
offense is not going to do much.
And just to give you some perspective, the average that Oregon had as far as on offense per game last year
Yeah.
was 44.2 points per
Yeah.
game.
Compared to 15.
You talk about, hey, you going to the game today? Nope.
Yeah, absolutely. Their win total is set at 7.5. They've got some decently tough games. I mean, it's not the worst schedule. They got to play Ohio State, Wisconsin, Washington, Michigan State, Nebraska, but they should also be able to beat teams like Minnesota, Northwestern, UCLA, Maryland. I mean, there's a good chance that they can get to 8 or 9 wins. I would not at all be surprised. This is a team I don't think the college football playoff is realistic. Personally, I see them more going to, a middling bowl game like the Citrus Bowl or the Music City Bowl, which they've been to several times the past few years. But the biggest question about this team is just simply can they score points? This season will be. I don't think this season is success or failure based on wins or losses. I think it's based on points per game. If you can show that you can score points, then yeah, you have a future in college football in this current era of college football. If not, I think Iowa could easily be passed by the wayside.
Yeah, I agree.
And kind of like Michigan for them too, I think that there is a chance if the offense, sees a slight uptick, there's a chance they could be in that conversation for the playoff in November. That's not to say that they'll get in, but if they're ranked around like the late teens, the early 20s, they're at least in that conversation, and I could see that happening because they've got a strong enough strength to schedule that
Hmm.
they could get in there. But I don't know. It's definitely not a failure of a season if you don't make the playoff. Again, I just think that the bar of success is offensive productivity instead of wins or losses.
Yeah, if Iowa gets to play in some games that have the weather effect of snow,
Yeah.
they'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very true. And I mean, they're gonna win some games based on defense alone. Like
Mhm.
they're gonna win 4 or 5 games because they held their opponent to 10 points and they scored 13 or 17 points. But when you go up against Oregon and Ohio State, you're not gonna win one of those games with 20 points.
Yeah,
They're gonna have to score in the 30s to even stay close with Oregon and Ohio State. And I don't think there's any world where that happens.
exactly. Um, you know, I totally forgot to mention our boy Carlos going to Ohio.
I thought about it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's a pretty good addition as well.
Yeah.
Especially as him, the way he coaches, he's
Mhm.
going to be able to get the most out of Quinshawn and Travion. That's
Mhm.
going to be nice for that whole offense. I mean, Ohio State, man, psh, that they can only mess it up, and
Mhm. Yeah, it's
hopefully
all
they
laid
do.
out for him.
And hopefully they do.
Well, we were talking about Caleb Downs maybe switching over to running back. You got Carlos teaching him.
Yeah,
We'll see how
teaching them.
that goes. I mean, that's
He
a very
can't.
good coach to be learning under.
Yeah, he's gonna learn real quick.
All right, that's gonna wrap up our show and tell for today. We've got 2 more episodes of this. I hope you guys enjoyed it and found it informative. I enjoyed doing the research. I learned a lot about these teams.
Yeah,
We're in the preseason now, so this is the time to actually start doing your previews and start getting ready for the year. So we'll be back next week with 6 more teams to go over, and then the week after that with the final 5 teams. And we'll do a little bit on Oregon's non-conference schedule as well, just to kind of touch on what we should see there. Just do you got anything else before we get out of here?
no man, stay hydrated out there. It's summertime, so don't complain about the heat if you out there. It's summertime. That's what my daughter said. My daughter
Yeah.
actually said, I was like, man, it's hot out here. He's like, Dad, it's summer. I'm like, of course it's hot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know what?
It's supposed to be.
You're right. So let me be quiet.
That's great. All right, we will end it on that. You can check out more of my work at duckswire.usatoday.com. Follow me at Zachary C. Neal on Twitter. Follow Jay Stu on Twitter at Jonathan Stewart1. Make sure to check out the Bleav and Panthers podcast as well. For myself, Zach Neal, for my co-host Jonathan Stewart, we'll talk to you guys next week. Until then, take it easy.